Welcome to the Field Report for Sunday, July 16th. Well, we read an article from the New York Times, and it was an opinion from Maureen Dowd. I want to make sure I get the article here for a moment. The Game of Trump. And when I read this article, first of all, I think the title just really perfect title for probably what I would love to write a good book on it. Seriously, it's a great title. But when you get into how she refers to him, President Trump, King of Chaos, I could see the chaos part. The thing is, it's as a result of the chaos that was created under King Barry Soetoro. So I would like to add the correction because this is we got to offer a rebuttal. What I find very difficult because of Washington, because the establishment is a reality, and they're used to doing things a certain way in Washington, and I can see that always being something that is awkward for those who are used to doing things, especially when they conduct press conferences. I could see that really being hard because once you get into a situation where they start changing things, people don't like change at all. I get that. But the one thing about Washington, or at least it's our understanding, is that every couple years you have elections and it's always a revolving door. So we know that for a fact. So while there are things that they maintain the protocols and consistency, and that's the superficial stuff, we understand that. That's typical, because if you didn't know that, then you would probably not understand the depths and where I'm headed with this article. So that aside, I could see that being difficult, because anytime there's a transition of power, and there has been a transition of power, it has just really been a rocky transition. This is probably one of the hardest transitions, because you've seen every activist group group out. But it was no different with George W. Bush. But this was a little different because we came off of 8 years of radical changes that took America, not from the center, but it pulled us so far left that it didn't even really give what we believe is the establishment, but it really didn't serve the people, okay? And we know that because anytime you pull a country in a different direction, it's going to cause a lot of imbalances. We're aware of that, but we always like the point to representation in Washington D.C. that representation keeps a balance of power, and the whole problem, and has been, is once that was out of balance, and once you had a shift in more executive orders, it took the power back. It took the power away from Congress, meaning the separation of powers existed. But under Obama, and I would include George W. Bush and probably presidents prior to President Trump, but let's just assume right now, focused on the story, that when you have executive power and privilege, it's not meant to be abused. Okay, we know that. Okay, now depending on some of the things that were authorized under that executive power is a separate matter. But just overall, we're just talking about the protocol, the standard in which our government operates. And we didn't see a budget for 8 years. Okay, can you imagine what that would have looked like? I mean, I remember the day when we were watching the initial reports when Barak was just coming into office, and our Congress did not even offer one budget, not one in the 8 years, which is actually one of the requirements in order to balance the budget, meaning we would not know where this money is being spent, because that was the whole purpose of doing a budget to begin with, because then you can see where money is being spent. And what really bothers me is when somebody doesn't authorize a budget, that means something shady is going on, because in our home or anybody else's home, when you do accounts receivable and you have paychecks going in and out, you need to have a tracking of where that money is going. And the only way we can know that is by saving receipts and things like that. And when you balance a budget, you know where money's going. Okay, what it tells me is that when somebody's hiding the credit card in our house or hiding it from money from somebody, it means there's something we're not aware of, or maybe there's something that we need to know. But however it is, when I don't get the account statement and I see that money's being spent a certain way, I know that there's a concern. So now it's a lot different when you're looking at a household budget overall, but you can make the comparison that a household budget is no different than holding a budget in the White House. And we created a program and a show back in 2007 because it's simply, it's so simple. I mean, even young adults who run a home know this. It's very hard to balance your utilities and bills without money coming in, and you have all this debt weighing down. I mean, marriages end over things like this. So without knowing, and no, we're not saying we're being so ridiculous that you count every penny, but in dollars and cents, yes, you do, because that's the only way you know where money's being spent. And there was this big gap in information. Budgets were supposed to be established for a reason. And we got out of the routine of expectation. It got to the point, it was so crazy that we never seen a budget in the 8 years. That is irresponsible, whether it's Republican or Democrat. And this is what people were talking about. That's why people showed up at these rallies. That's why many of us ended up at the Kill the Bill rally. They weren't representing the people. I was at the Longworth building. I've told a lot of people that, a lot of these people didn't show up at these rallies, but we did. And we showed up at several rallies. We weren't just at a couple, okay? We've been to several rallies in Washington, D.C., spending our own money, where representatives down there they were hiding in their office. They literally were told that they could not sit in their office by Capitol Police. You can't hide from the public. That's part of the whole point that having town hall meetings is that they have to meet with the people. Now, I understand it's been a really threatening environment. So on one end, yeah, you don't want, after what happened to Representative Steve Scalise, there's no argument. There has to be safety and protocols. And I would even say as much as that those representatives that discussed about carrying a gun, I would think that should be a requirement for representatives after what happened to Representative Steve Scalise. But what Maureen Dowd is stating, and so many like her, who like to throw these little sarcastic, remarks, the problem is that they're responsible for the chaos. It's very arrogant that they don't take responsibility, and especially those who write for the New York Times. And I like Maureen Dowd's columns. I actually really, sometimes she can be very good at, I just like her. Sometimes every once in a while she'll come up with a good article. So I don't want to just make this about a Democrat, Republican thing, but her article today really bothers me because a lot of that personal responsibility has a lot to do with term limits. A lot of the reasons that people got stuck in their ways is because there isn't term limits. And most of the time, these people they're lifetime Democrats, they're lifetime Republicans. And the reason why they're not comfortable with the change is that they've been there for a lifetime, not making room for new people to come in there. And what Sean Spicer and many people who are just, they casually argue that Sean Spicer had to go find something to do at the French embassy. I mean, and then they said that, President Trump, they were, spilling over themselves because they had to go to the U.S. Open or the French Open or something like that. I'm pretty sure that I don't want to play this game where there aren't dignitaries and there isn't a lot of pageantry in being the president. But there was no more different pageantry with President Trump. President George W. Bush. There wasn't any more different pageantry. In fact, that's the whole point. And one of the things that was lacking in America and was lacking over this last 10 years is morale. And one of the things that was crushing the morale of our troops in America is we had leadership that was purposely going out to fail, purposely hurting our military. And there was not one thing we could do but sit there and go join rallies and listen to Tea Party candidates talk about it. And luckily for us, we saw what conservatism could be. Now, can we get a little more creative? Absolutely. Can we get wise up? Absolutely. But see, they always like to make it seem as if conservatives aren't creative, they're not smart, or somehow they're not trendy. Actually, I think the conservative movement has changed that. And I think because of social media, they were ahead of it, because really, if you see what's trending on social media, it's usually, you see Heritage Foundation, you see the Susan B. Anthony list, you see all these groups that have well established, put themselves in a position where they don't even receive donations. Do you know that? I mean, Planned Parenthood, you want to talk about unfair. Now, you got two groups, one that represents the pro-life, which is the Susan B. Anthony list, and then you have the Planned Parenthood. And guess who gets all the funding? Planned Parenthood. There's no funding that goes to Susan B. Anthony. And these are advocates that represent the pro-life movement. Now, if you were to take that funding that Planned Parenthood gets, and they were to give it to Susan B. Anthony, why not? Why wouldn't that funding go to a group that's equal to Planned Parenthood in the right that you got Planned Parenthood that represents pro-choice, and the Susan B. Anthony group that represents the pro-life? Meaning, they always tell us how unfair it is. Let me tell you what unfair is. That the pro-life groups never get funded the way Planned Parenthood. And the idea that they call it unfair, you know what's unfair? Is a lot of conservatives never got any of the, I don't know if it's 501c3 status, but they got criminalized for that. That is outrageous. It was always very one-sided. So when we talk about these reports, we see how one-sided it is. You know, in the beginning, we didn't have a voice. We didn't know how to approach this topic. You would have told me 10 years ago I'd be sitting here talking about the things I'm talking about. I would have said, no way. First of all, I didn't know what I understand. I did my homework. I started paying attention. And a lot of you have too. And I know we don't know everything about everything, but we can speak on specific things. And at least we can speak for the things that we have seen and what goes on in Washington, D.C., because I was just came back from Washington, D.C. You know, it's very easy to make a one-sided argument, and oftentimes this is why we get crushed, because we don't have enough courage to stand for our convictions. And this is why so many people got over on us in the past. And the truth is, every time we try to do something right, whether it be personally or professionally, somehow there's always someone that's going to cut us down and attack us. And instead of us backing in a corner and making apologies for policies and the things that are going on that really do have an effect on America, like real education reform. You just saw President Trump actually authorize an executive order for education, which actually could make such a difference right now. I mean, it would take what happened to America from Common Core to all the things that I remember. We went on and on by watching reports from Alan B. West and several reports from Mark Levin. I mean, I'm not a constitutional scholar. I don't read and write a bunch of books, but I can tell you, overall, the average person understands, the common man understands, that when you start taking away the things that help and keep America free, and you restrict them by adding more regulations, it doesn't take somebody with 30, 50 years of time in Washington, D.C. to understand they're getting ripped off. Okay? No, they don't have big titles. No, they don't have PhDs. And most of us don't have any of that. But it doesn't take it doesn't take a brainiac to understand. It doesn't take a brain surgeon, no pun intended, to Dr. Ben Carson. I mean, the things that the average common person that has coped with when it comes to being taken advantage of in every way. We felt the squeeze in every way, and we're still feeling the squeeze. We're coming out of it, barely. But, you know, when you hear reports that Janet Yellen is ready to pull something with the Federal Reserve or the IMF, I mean, we know that anytime President Trump is actually doing something effective on the international stage, okay, it just seems that they want to go rig that too. And then you read an article where it's President Trump is the king of chaos. How interesting is that? Okay, it was the very Democrats that invented chaos. It was people like Rahm Emanuel that says they never let a good crisis go to waste. They are the chaos. They created the chaos, which of course things are going on in order. We were told apparently from the Democrats that he was going to create Armageddon. He has not. Listen, for the first time, what was, I think, shocking to a lot of us, and I think we're getting used to the idea, to see a naval armada protecting its allies and protecting United States interests. I think a lot of people were angry. I mean, not on purpose, I think it was just hard to believe that we actually had a president that actually positioned America in that area, the peninsula. Really? Since 1950, my dad fought in North Korea, in the Korean War. That's how long it's been since we've actually seen a United States military, where the president authorizes the military to do their job. That's incredible. It's incredible. And what I think of the idiocy that happens in some of this is that you don't have to be politically connected to understand the common person in America, including myself, because we're not that well connected, okay? I mean, we might know people that know people, but the average American knows a lot of people. It is who you know. And those are the two ways to recover from poverty, as I learned from my professor in college, is that the best way to overcome poverty, one, it's who you know and the relationship you establish. And what Washington, D.C. has established, one thing, is that as long as there's not term limits, you can live there forever, and you could probably even put a grave there next to it. And looking at the way politicians behave, including John McCain, because they're putting off the Obamacare decision till after he comes out of surgery. You know what? This is not about John McCain. This is about the people, and they should be able to go forward. But if you are a lifetime Democrat and you're a lifetime Republican, and you've literally lived and slept there, and you pitched a tent there in the halls of Congress, and heck, you even build your own showers in there. That's how long you've been there. You practically live there, and that shouldn't be the case, but that is the case, because most of you probably even have a sidebar and a restaurant in there too. Okay, you practically live there. Okay, that's how long some of the lifetime Democrats have been there. It was always meant for elections where the door would revolve, and you always let you would refresh well, in some cases, what we call is when we're at the bar and we work at the restaurant, is that you actually refresh everything so that, so the next table can come in. The people at the table right now are different from what they're used to. And it's no wonder you hear the sarcasm you do, because no one likes change. But the very people, the king of change, Barry Soetoro, was the one that wanted all this change. And all we got was this. But now, okay, so, we know the sarcasm, but we also know that you're creatures of habit. And Mr. King of Change left us with king of nothing, okay? America's bankrupt. America's bankrupt. We are in the negative. We're not in the positive. We're trillions in debt, okay? And when you see President Trump, the worst thing you could ever do, and I thank God that President Trump understands what a debt would do to a country. It holds us enslaved to other lenders. We should not be that way. That's why they want to go after the nationalism, because that means if America gets out of debt, which is very much possible, look at the economic boom in the Wall Street, and you can see that America to easily become very independent right now, which puts us in a position of it puts us in a great position to help other smaller countries. That's how America used to be. We used to be the country that went and did the humanitarian aid. And when you take America out of the picture, when you take us out of the picture, what you're saying to other countries, they're going to be trampled over by these dictatorships. And that's truly why America always wanted to be in a position not involved in every war, not involved in every conflict, but really kind of as a backdrop to helping those small countries in the time of need. Okay, we should not be in every war. That's, and anyone that knows is often referred to us as every war is a banker's war. And honestly, we don't need to be in any war, whether it be a bank war or not. We don't need to be in war, period. It's easy to forget what happened. We lose sight of that. And I think a lot of people do a lot of finger pointing. And listen, I wasn't that, and I did not know what I know today. I took classes. I went to college in this period, and I wouldn't have known. I just took the risk of going down to Washington, D.C. and going to these events. I would have never known, much like everybody else I met at these rallies. And I talked to them on the street, and many of them were excited when President Trump acknowledged a lot of the people who have been, and we're talking about 40, 50 years of unemployment in these regions. They have not seen a revival in communities like here in Beaver Falls, where they shut down the steel mills. To see President Trump come off that plane and to see how excited it literally brought these communities back to life. And when the West Virginia miners went back to work, you can see that there are towns in West Virginia, just in this region alone, that are literally ghost towns. There was no rescue. There was no humanitarian effort. There was a lot of storms and weather events here in the United States. I can think of Oklahoma, when there was a devastating, I think it was an EF5 tornado, and there was floods that there was no help from the federal government or no acknowledgement from President Barack Obama at the time. It was astonishing. When America was in a crisis where a president's supposed to show up, a lot of times he was golfing the whole time. So we have a president that shows up at events. He salutes his military. He actually respects them. It's not a casual, salute. He really means when he salutes an enlisted military. That is such an honor. President Trump, you really have respect in ways I don't think this country's used to. And they can't get used to because they're so used to being screwed over in the Game of Thrones. Well, this Trump card actually probably may have changed the game. Thank God.